Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to Bullony Basketball. New episode for a new week. I'm here with Johnny. How's it going, Johnny?
Hey, what's going on, man? End of April, everything's happening so quick. But excited to be inching closer to the playoffs. Excited to talk another week of basketball. What's going on with you?
Yeah, pretty much the same feelings right now. More basketball to be played, and we got a few more weeks until the playoffs get started. I know we keep saying that, but every week the anticipation rises a little bit more. But we're gonna talk about some interesting topics today. Nothing like I feel like too crazy happened, but I feel like this is a good week to look at some of the stuff that's been happening recently that won't be getting enough attention. And the first thing that I have here is about both the Bridges players in the league. Of course, they're not related, but both Miles and Mikal Bridges have been playing great in parts of the season. Miles Bridges started off a little bit slow, but over the last 12 games, he's averaging like 20 points, 7.5 rebounds, 3 assists, and shooting like a 51, 46, 81 splits. Mikal Bridges, we already know what he's been doing this year. A most improved player candidate, averaging like 13, 4.5 rebounds, and shooting about a 50, 40, 80 on the season. And he's been one of the best two-way players in the league and might even make an all-defensive team this year. But what are your thoughts on, both these players and their improvements this season?
Yeah, I'd like to hone in more on Mikal just for a couple of reasons. A, he's on a winning team, and B, I think that he's a more valuable player because of what he brings on both ends of the floor. We know that he's a great defender, and we've known that. But the strides he's made offensively, and it helps to have a guy like Chris Paul, because now he has another guy that can facilitate. But like you said, about 13, 4.5, and 13, 4.5, and 2. He's not really a big playmaker, but shooting north of 40% from 3, which is huge. His 2-point field goal percentage is also incredible. Shooting 62.2% effective field goal rate, which is insane given his position. But he's really making the most of his opportunity, and he's not the best player. He's not the second best player, and he might not even be the third best player on the team, but he knows his role, and he does that so well. A player that Philly could have and should have, but doesn't. Talk about a couple two-way wings that Philly let slip through their hands in both Mikal Bridges and Jimmy Butler, but that's a story for another day. Miles Bridges, on the other hand, is improving, but a lot of what he does is reliant on the players around him. So I kind of noted that same thing with Mikal, in that he needs somebody to facilitate to him, but he's such a good defender. Miles Bridges isn't that defender that Mikal is, but he's still an effective player. Having Lonzo there certainly helps, gives him some easy buckets and whatnot. But both have improved. Both have shown great leaps given their young age. They're not hitting that wall, which is good to see. But I like especially what Mikal is doing in Phoenix.
Yeah, and you bring up that Philly point for Mikal Bridges. That's still kind of a bit weird because his mom's relationship with the organization prior to the draft. But, just what he's done this year for the Phoenix Suns, I don't know how he's not, at least like a top 5 candidate for most improved player. It seems like, not only, we all know he's a great defensive player, but I feel like a lot of people underrate his and also Cam Johnson on that team's ability to hit shots late in games. And they're both like so young, they're still like not really too experienced, which is kind of the most surprising part. And that's what I'm looking forward to seeing with them and with another star like Devin Booker, a rising star like Ayton, and then we know what Chris Paul does in the playoffs. That's why they're going to be so interesting to see. But I think a lot of that is from Mikal Bridges' improvement this year. As for Miles Bridges, you mentioned he's not the defender Mikal is, but I think maybe the injuries to Gordon Hayward and LaMelo Ball might have been a blessing in disguise because it's given him more of an opportunity to shine as of late. And much like what De'Aaron Fox said after his rookie year, where I believe he didn't even make an all-rookie team, Miles Bridges said something like he was disappointed with how he played in his rookie year, and now he's in his third season, and he's playing some of the best basketball of his career. The game against Boston the other day, he pretty much went off. And he's kind of serving a similar role to Aaron Gordon on the Nuggets, except I would even say that he's shooting a little bit better from deep. So it's interesting to see if the Hornets do find their way into the playoffs with LaMelo Ball coming back soon. Hopefully Gordon Hayward comes back before playoff time. It should be interesting to see how him along with those two, Rozier, Devontae Graham, how they all gel together for this team.
Yeah, it's possible that we get to see both these guys in the playoffs for the first time. We're going to see Mikal Bridges. That's already a thing for sure because they just clinched their playoff spot with a win against the Clippers, which was Wednesday night. But we'll see what the Hornets do. They might find themselves in the playoffs, and if they do, it should be interesting to see how both these guys perform.
Yeah, and much like the Suns' point, we'll get more into that later in the show. We'll talk about all the teams that have clinched. But, I mean, just moving on to our next topic, we're going to be talking about someone pretty close to both of us, and that is Derrick Rose. It seems like he's starting to find his role. Of course, last game yesterday wasn't really too great for him. Of course, the Knicks still got the win, but, over the 5 games prior was averaging about 20 points, 5 assists, 3.5 rebounds, shooting over 60% from the field and 37% from 3, which I feel like a lot of people wouldn't really think of Derrick Rose when they hear those shooting splits. And he'd shot 50% or better in 6 straight and 8 of the last 9 prior to that. So I don't know. It looks like Derrick Rose is starting to find his role on this New York Knicks team, being the veteran. And I would also say that he's playing some of the best defense of his career. I feel like not a lot of people are looking at that side of the ball for him as well. But what do you make of D Rose's impact for the Knicks?
D Rose, Tom Thibodeau, little reunion, third team I believe it's that they've been together. The Bulls, the Timberwolves. Well, sorry, the Bulls, the Timber Bulls, and now the New York Knicks. But like you said, the veteran presence. It's a team that has a good mix of both young and veteran players. But Rose, I think, has really established himself as the veteran's vet, if you will. You have Alec Burks, who's a veteran. You have Alfred Payton, who's been in the league. You have Reggie Bullock, who's been in the league. But you don't have that player of that caliber that has also been in the league. Julius Randle's the team's best player, but I don't know how much of a veteran you want to call him, how much experience he has. So I think all that meshes well. He's on a team that's playing incredible defense, so that certainly helps. Whether or not you think Derrick Rose is having one of the better defensive seasons of his seasons or not doesn't matter, considering that the team is just one of the best defensive teams in the league. So even if you can find spots where he might be lacking, the team success is covering some of that up. But like you said, I think it's just comfort, right? Sometimes it's a change of scenery that players need. Sometimes it's just a new coach. You never can really attribute it to something specific, but it just seems that he's found a home here in New York, and he's making the most of his opportunity. He's playing closer alongside Julius Randle, and you just love to see it, especially given what he's been through in the past.
Yeah, I think the biggest word that I could take away from what you just said was comfort. I think D Rose has rubbed off on the guys in New York, like Quickly, Randall, and all the young guys, and also like some of the other veterans like Alec Burks, Nerlens Noel, Taj Gibson. But I think they're also rubbing off on him in the sense where, he seems even more motivated on the defensive end, and maybe that's why it's bringing out the best in his defensive abilities. And I think, we saw that with the Bulls during his time where he was MVP, All-Star. He really wasn't a terrible defender. I think that people started critiquing more and more on his defense after the injuries with the Bulls, with the Knicks, and maybe someone like the Timberwolves and the Pistons. But I think now it's starting to be like at the best of its ability that we've pretty much seen. But yeah, I think he's starting to find his role, and we all know that he plays better in the playoffs. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he's going to bring come playoff time, because it seems like the Knicks, the way they've been playing lately, they're going to find themselves in it.
Yeah, I'm excited to just see not only what Rose does in the playoffs, but what this New York Knicks team does in the playoffs. Expectations are going to be varied depending on who you talk to, but I think it's always a good thing when the Knicks are in the playoffs.
Yeah, and especially since it's a new team, like we haven't seen this collection of guys make the playoffs yet. So it's always nice when it's like the first year, just like what we talked about with the Suns. So it should be interesting. But moving on to our next topic, it is about the scoring championship. We got two people that are very close right now. Currently, Bradley Beal leads Steph Curry 31.3 points per game to 31.2 points per game. Beal, 5 of his last 11 games are against teams 500 and better, and then Steph Curry, 3 of his last 10 are against teams 500 or better. Not that that would really make too much of a difference because they've both gone off against great teams and bad teams, but just to give like some idea for what they're going up against in the remainder of the season, what do you expect at the end of the year? Who will be holding up the scoring crown?
Yeah, I think it's Steph. Here's why. He's really the only. Well, I don't know if I want to say the only, because Wiggins is a scorer, but he doesn't score on the level that Russell Westbrook does. And Jordan Poole can come off the bench and score. But Steph is really the only true scorer on that team. Like, he's the only guy that's hunting his own buckets. And even though he's getting double and triple teamed, he's still putting up 30-plus point games. I just think that there's games where Bradley Beal could get away with scoring 15 because Russ can go off for 50. Like, there's nobody on the Warriors that's going off for 50 not named Steph. But that is not true when you look at the Wizards roster. And considering how close the edge is now, that it's only a tenth of a point, that's why I lean Steph.
Yeah, I think Curry will end up with it too. I feel like the reason is because, like a lot of the teams, like I just mentioned, like who they're up against for the next 2 or 3 weeks. I feel like in the Warriors' case, like they're not really the team that's going to necessarily blow many teams out of the water. They will occasionally get blown out, like they did the other night against Dallas, but I feel like Steph is going to do all he can to keep them in the game. What we've seen with the Wizards recently is, they went on a big 8-game win streak, and both Beal and Westbrook have been playing out of their mind. And I feel like Beal, what I believe he was averaging like 33, 34 early on in the year, like the first half of the year. So he's kind of dropped. Steph, the trend has been going up. I believe he was at like 28 a game before his injury, and then ever since he's gone up. And past guys like Giannis, Embiid, Dame. So I think Steph will end up with it. But yeah, I mean, both these teams are in similar situations too. So, I mean, take that as you will.
And yeah, like you said, like there's stuff to be played for both these teams. Like both of them are trying to find their way into it, at the very least, a playing game. So all these games from here on out are going to have some sort of meaning to it. So you should see both Steph and Beal looking to have, I guess, better games than they normally do. It's not like they're gonna ever want to have a bad game, but they have some more motivation attached to each and every game.
Yeah, and I guess for Beal's case, he might have to do so a little bit more because I think the difference is like 2 games with the Bulls, who are 11th right now, and the Warriors. I think they're up like 4 games on New Orleans, Sacramento, like some of these other teams. So maybe that could be an advantage for Bradley Beal, but I don't know. It's going to be close. I lean towards Steph though for the scoring crown. It would be his second in his career as well, so that should be interesting. But let's move on to a battle between two teams that you know, I think many expected them to be for sure in the playoffs at the beginning of the year. But the way New York has played, the way Atlanta has played, and I believe both of them have the tiebreaker on both of these teams. Or excuse me, New York doesn't have it over Miami, but of course New York is the 4th seed, Miami is the 7th seed. Still a bit of a gap there. So looking at like Boston and Miami, they have 9 games left each. The schedule strength is pretty similar. What do you expect from these teams? Do you think that one of them could take the last top 6 spot over the other, or do you think they'll both miraculously turn it around here at the end, or maybe both of them flounder?
Um, I'll. This is there's three ways I see it playing out, and I'll kind of assign likelihoods. I think the most likely outcome is that Miami finishes as the 6th seed and Boston finishes as the 7th seed. I just have more trust in Miami, and I know they've been up and down this year, as have Boston. But I'm going to put my trust into Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and veterans such as Trevor Ariza and Andre Iguodala before I do in Tatum, Brown, and a bunch of young guys surrounding them. Second most likely outcome for me is that the Celtics and the Heat both overtake Atlanta, and Atlanta becomes the 7th seed, and Boston becomes Boston stays at the 6th seed, but Miami and Atlanta flip. So Miami gets the 5 seed, and Atlanta gets the 7 seed. Then the third outcome is just stays as is, and to me that's the least likely. So that's kind of how I view it shaking out.
I feel like the thing that I'm looking at is, well, we know Atlanta has the tiebreaker over both Boston and Miami. I feel like both Boston and Miami, though, this year have been a little bit streaky. And I know Boston lost the last one. I can't remember who they just lost to, but I know they lost one to Charlotte as well. But it seems like they had just come off like a big winning streak, and Miami not so much. So I feel like Miami is kind of going to turn it around here at the end, and it's going to make it tough for Boston because they don't have the tiebreaker over Atlanta, and I think they're another whole game back in New York. So I would probably expect the Knicks, Hawks, and the Heat to get like those last few spots in the top 6. Boston will probably get 7th. And then, the other teams will follow, Hornets, Pacers, whatever. But yeah, I think that's probably how it's going to play out. But, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Atlanta dropped to 7th. The only thing is they do have the tiebreaker on both teams, so that makes it really tough. Especially since I think Boston and Miami both play each other 2 more times this year, so someone's going to be taking at least one more loss there.
Yeah, I guess that would kind of then make me lean towards still Miami leapfrogging. I think Miami leapfrogs Atlanta at the very least. But that's the beauty of the NBA parity. Who knows what's going to happen? Hopefully no more injuries arise, but at any point in time, an injury can occur, and everything we said just gets thrown off the rails.
Yeah, and I will say it is possible Boston could still get in there. Both those games are in Boston. They've been pretty good at home this year. Miami struggled on the road, so there could be that advantage as well. So, and that will also determine, like the tiebreaker as well. If Boston won both those games against Miami, then they have the tiebreaker, and that's 2 games advantage on the Heat. Then it's going to be tough to overcome. So it's not like Miami is the only team that can do something here. I feel like we both were kind of saying like it's going to be Miami doing this and that. But no, Boston, they're still a great team. Tatum, Brown, so I think that it's very possible they could end up there as well.
Certainly.
But let's move on to the teams that have currently clinched. We mentioned them a little bit at the beginning of the show. We talked about Phoenix, also the 1 seed ahead of them, the Utah Jazz, and then the top 2 in the Eastern Conference, the Brooklyn Nets and the Philadelphia 76ers. Of these 4 teams, which one do you think of, the clinched berths, which one do you think means the most? And of these 4 teams, what do you expect in the playoffs?
I think Phoenix means the most, just because it's been, I think, about 10 years now. I think 2011 was the last time they made the playoffs. So that means the most because all 3 of these teams, well, Brooklyn didn't make it. Did they make it last year? I can't remember if they made it last year or not, but they've been in the playoffs in the last few years. 76ers made it last year. Utah made it last year. But Phoenix, like I said, they've been on that playoff drought. So that certainly means the most. Expectations, they go all over the place. Like Brooklyn, to me, it's a failed season if they don't win the championship. But granted, a lot of it depends on the health of their big 3. Like, we don't know who's in and who's out on a daily basis. If they get Kyrie, KD, and Harden healthy come playoff time, I think they should be the unanimous favorites in the East and possibly the favorites in the league. But their expectation is to win a championship. Philly, same thing. Injuries all over the place. Is Embiid going to be healthy? Is Simmons going to be healthy? Is Tobias Harris going to be healthy? we haven't seen a fully healthy Sixers team in a while to know exactly how they want to shake out their rotations, shake out their bench rotations. It looks like it's going to be something like a bench unit of Shake Milton, George Hill, Korkmaz, Tybal, and Dwight Howard. But we haven't seen a lot of that together. I think they're the second or the third best team in the East. So for them, at the very least, to make the Eastern Conference Finals, I think it's an uphill battle from there on out. Utah, injuries again. I mean, we keep saying it. Donovan Mitchell's been out. Now Mike Conley's out. They've been the best team in the regular season this year. Do I have them as the favorites in the West? I do not. But I think for them, they're looking to make the conference finals this year at the very least. This is the team that has probably the most chemistry out of all the teams here, just because they've been playing together for a couple of years now. And then you go to Phoenix, and same thing. Not the favorites in the West, in my opinion, but I think they're shooting for conference finals or higher. Well, obviously they're shooting for the NBA title, but I think if they make it to the conference finals, I'd consider that a successful season. But they're shooting for higher as well.
Yeah, I think in terms of the playoffs, who this clinch means more for of the four teams listed, it's got to be Phoenix. It's been so long since they've made it. Back when they had like Nash and Amari Stoudemire, so like it's been a long time. It also means a lot, I guess, for the Brooklyn Nets because this is the first time they've clinched it when they've had like a serious contending team in recent history. In terms of like what should be expected in the playoffs, I would say that it kind of aligns in the order that I have like listed here. Brooklyn Nets, I think a lot of people are expecting with that much talent that they're the best, if not one of the top two, top three teams in the NBA and the best in the Eastern Conference. So I think anything short of making the NBA Finals is a disappointment for them putting together what many consider a super team. As for the Philadelphia 76ers, I think anything short of a conference finals is pretty disappointing, especially since they have an easier schedule than Brooklyn to end off the season. So there's a good chance they'll end up as the first seed. And, playing that 8 seed, they definitely should get past whoever's in that position. And then also, if they have to play New York or Atlanta in the second round or Boston, who they've played really well against the past few seasons when the Sixers are fully healthy. So I think losing to any of those teams would be a disappointment. So I think at least the conference finals for them. The Utah Jazz, I know you said the conference finals should be expected for them. I would say probably the second round, because you don't want to be – they're likely going to end up as the first seed in the Western Conference and the NBA, but you don't want to be that team that gets knocked out as the first seed because then you'll get clowned pretty much forever and ever. But in terms of like who they're likely going to face in the next round, the Clippers just lost the other night, so now they're tied in the loss column with Denver. And then that other team, besides those two in the 4-5 position, is the Lakers. So if you're playing a healthy Clippers or Lakers team, most likely, I feel like not a lot of people will be favoring Utah in that series. If they were playing maybe like Portland or Dallas or one of those teams, then yeah, maybe the conference finals should be expected. But it just doesn't seem likely that they're going to avoid all those teams. So I would say the second round. And then the Phoenix Suns, probably the second round as well. But even just making the playoffs is a success in this season as well because it's been so long and we don't know how these guys are going to play in the playoffs. A lot of them are young, so many of them could struggle. I trust Chris Paul, but we don't know what playoff Devin Booker is going to look like or playoff Ayton or Saric. He kind of had like a little bit of a run, but never in a big role, I feel like, that he has right now. Same with Bridges, Cam Johnson, Cameron Payne, like the list goes on. So that's kind of how I feel with the teams that are currently clinched.
Yeah, the West is just such a bloodbath that it's hard to identify because you're only going to get two teams in the conference finals, but we didn't even talk about either the Clippers or the Lakers because they haven't clinched yet, and those might be the two best teams in the West. Not by record wise, but by what we think. So there's a lot of parity. We can't I certainly, I don't want to speak for you, but I cannot wait to see how the West shakes out because each and every matchup is going to be incredible. When you're looking at your 6, 7, and 8 seeds being the Mavericks and the Blazers and possibly the Warriors, it's going to be an electric playoffs.
Well, you would be speaking for me because I'm also looking forward to it. But let's close out the show with our daily picks, starting off with April 30th. We got the Atlanta Hawks and the Philadelphia 76ers. I believe they just played the other day, and Philly crushed them. But do you think Philly wins this one as well?
Yeah, give me Philly again.
I also got the Sixers winning this. On May 1st, we got the Pacers and the Thunder. Who do you got here?
I'm going to go with the team that's not trying to tank, so I'll take Indiana.
I also got the Pacers. Malcolm Brogdon's been playing well recently, too. On May 2nd, we got the Raptors and the Lakers. Who do you got here?
I'll take LA.
I also have the Lakers. LeBron should be nearing his return soon, so we'll get more details on that shortly, within the next few days, about a week or so. But we'll see. On May 3rd, we got the Warriors and the Pelicans. Who do you got here?
I like the Warriors. Each and every game is super important here on out.
Yeah, I got the Warriors. The Pelicans, they play them back-to-back, and on the first of back-to-backs, the Pelicans have been pretty bad this year. So I'm going to go with the Warriors. On May 4th, we got the Nets and Bucks. This might be the best game that we have on the list. Who do you got here?
I'm going to take Milwaukee. Kyrie's sitting out tonight, the 29th. Harden's not going to be back. I could totally see this where the Nets just don't show any of their cards and sit all three of the big three. So without looking too much into it, I'm going to take Milwaukee because I expect all their big guys to play.
I'm going to take Milwaukee as well. I feel like the Bucks, they've struggled against a lot of great teams this year, but the Nets, there's a big question with who's going to be available. So I'm going to go with Milwaukee as well. On the 5th, we got the Suns and the Hawks. What do you got here?
I like Phoenix here.
I think this would be a very close game, but I think Phoenix is going to pull it off at the end. And then on the last day, May 6th, we got the Bulls and the Hornets. Who do you got here?
I like Charlotte.
I'm going to go with Chicago. They've done pretty well against the Hornets in recent history, so I'm going to live off that trend, and hopefully they can just get a win. They'll make the play-in, but getting a win against the Charlotte Hornets, I guess that's what this season relies on at this point. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for us. I hope you guys enjoyed. Any final thoughts?
Nothing. No, I think we covered it, guys. As always, thanks for the support. Thanks for everything. Leave any comments, any of that below, any topics you guys want us to hit on, and we will certainly do our best to address each and every one of those. So thanks as always.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll be getting more and more updates as we get closer to the playoffs, which I think next week will be about a week from the playoffs too, so that should be good. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys for watching, and we're out. Peace.